Okay, so before we get started, I'm going to make sure everyone sees this. So if you go to the top of the screen where it says Q&A, at the end, we're going to do questions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of them. This is a big rule change. I'll say overall, very good rule change. At least compared to what we've had since 2023. So overall, I would say really, really good. I think it's going to overall bring down labor costs for people pretty significantly. That and I found a lot of the rule to be pretty interesting because it reflected a lot of the things that we've been saying for years into the problems with how H-2A wage rates are determined, and then the impact that it has on our ability as an industry to actually compete globally. So overall, I'd say really, really good. And it's also nice to see that they're recognizing some of those issues that have been with the H-2A program for years. So let's go ahead and get started here. And again, Q&A is going to be at the top. So just as we go through, feel free to ask questions in there. Don't be offended when I don't answer them right away. I can't even see them, so I'll get to them at the end whenever I can see them again. But let's talk about it. So last week, the Department of Labor issued an interim final rule. Normally, the way that normally the way that this works is there's a proposed rule, and then there's a commenting period, and there's a final rule. And that's what I was expecting to happen because that's how it normally happens. But that's not what they did this time. This time, what they did was they went through a rulemaking process that was much quicker. There's still a comment period, so if we have comments, we can always do that before they issue the final rule. But they did do an interim final rule, which means that it's actually effective as the date of the rule, which was last week. So on October 2nd, the Department of Labor released an interim final rule revising the adverse effective wage rate methodology for H-2A workers. They did this in 2023. That was whenever they made the really big changes, in particular when you're talking about what they called non-range occupations. These were the occupations that didn't fall cleanly within the traditional agricultural occupations. So we saw it a lot with things like construction workers and truck drivers and those sorts of things. This rule didn't completely revert back on a lot of that, but it did address some of the wage discrepancies that we see, and it also changed how the wage rate's determined, which is really nice. So I'm going to get into all those details in a little bit. This rule does impact all H-2A agricultural employers, but especially those non-range employers. It impacts them even more. And then the reason that they had to do this, so a few weeks ago, I don't remember the exact date, there was a court ruling in Louisiana where they determined that the 2003 or 2023 wage rate methodology was arbitrary and capricious, which is great. And then after that, the Department of Labor terminated the Farm Labor Survey, and so this is catching up to all that. So this is how I expect the wage rates to actually be determined going into next year. This is how it is right now. I think that it's going to stay consistent. So there's some good sides to that and bad sides to that. We'll talk about all that. But just at a high level, that's what it is. So everyone here probably knows about the adverse effective wage rates, what it is. It sets the minimum wage rate floor that employers must pay to the H-2A workers. Adverse effective wage rates are a big deal, especially whenever they change. And one of the things that this rule didn't do was it didn't change the time that the new wage rates are determined for non-range occupations. I still expect those in July. So that's something to pay attention to because I know it's right in the middle of the working season. So that's unfortunate. But the normal range occupations, those will still change. Actually, those will probably change in July too. So that's one part that's a bit different. And I think that probably something that needs to be addressed later by the Department of Labor, because I know it's right in the middle of the season and it makes cost predicting really difficult. One of the really cool things that this new wage rate rule did was it broke down the skill level of the jobs into two separate tiers of skill levels. It's skill level 1 and skill level 2. The wage rates that y'all are used to seeing for non-range occupations, think of the truck drivers, the construction laborers. The way that you would think about those and how it relates to this rule is those would basically be skill level 2. Now, that doesn't mean that that's how it should be, because there's a lot of construction labor jobs, for example, that don't have minimum experience requirements and their entry level roles. They could still be applied skill level 1 wages, which has a considerable impact on the actual wages. The way that those are determined is based off of the OEWS wage rate data still. So just like it was, still a statewide average, just like it was. The difference is that skill level 1 is at the 17th percentile on that range, and the skill level 2's at the 50th percentile, basically. And that y'all are used to have seen the 50th percentile regardless of skill level. So that is going to be one big impact, and it's going to bring down a lot of the wage rates for y'all, but there's more to it than just that. So here are the big things that happened here. The fourth one, I want to be careful about how we phrase this, because in here it says a deduction. It's not a deduction like you would see with taxes, or if you were deducting something from someone's wages. That's not what it is. It's more of a reduction. But the new data uses only the BLS OEWS wage rate because the USDA discontinued the farm labor survey, and then it breaks it into two separate skill levels: skill level 1, skill level 2, and then there are still specific wages for that are broken out based off of occupation. So that's what you're used to seeing. And then the Department of Labor is going to further reduce the wage rate for H-2A workers by referencing the statewide HUD data, and they looked at the average rent on a 4-bedroom apartment. They assumed that 8 workers will stay in there, and then they figured out a wage rate based off of a 40-hour work week. So the way that looks is it'll on the Department of Labor's website, that it will have the wage rate data on there, and it will show it adjusted. You need to know what the adjusted and unadjusted wage rates are, because you'll pay corresponding workers the unadjusted wage rate, and you'll pay H-2A workers the adjusted wage rate. And I'm going to go into a little bit about the rationale there in just a little bit, but so just from a practical perspective, this is the way that it looks. Is you see a skill level 1 in Alabama, just a regular field livestock worker, it would have been $11.25 an hour. After the wage adjustment, it's $10.05 an hour. The wage adjustment it varies widely by state. So as you might imagine, states like California, states like Hawaii, where the wage or the housing costs are really high, it impacts the wages more. The Department of Labor did set a cap on this, where the housing adjustments can't exceed 30% of the workers' pay. But if you look at the data, no state meets that right now. So it's not really an issue, but it is something to be aware of. And just remember that this is not a calculation that y'all are coming up with. This is a calculation that is predetermined for you. And so the way that it'll look is you'll have an adjusted wage rate and an unadjusted wage rate. So let's talk a little bit about why the Department of Labor made this change. So they got rid of the farm labor survey, and we knew that that was going to be a little bit hectic because that normally comes out in January. So I guess that's probably the rationale for more of an interim rule than a final rule, because they didn't have time for that this year. But they wanted to ensure stability amid labor shortages and enforcement pressures in the H-2A world. H-2A usage has gone up considerably over the last several years, and so have too the wage rates. If you look at wage rates on average back in 2008, for example, it was like $8.25 an hour, and now the average wage rate was over $17. It's just gone up considerably. And the Department of Labor, even in their interim final rule, discussed how what the agricultural industry is a globally competitive industry, and it's really hard for U.S. employers to compete whenever similar jobs in Mexico would pay $1 or $2 an hour. And so it is nice to see them actually recognizing those things. They also wanted to they recognized the importance of our food supply chain. That this is something that I've been talking about for years. Whenever we think about H-2A and our own food supply chain, is that there's a real national interest to ensure that we are feeding our own people. And the Department of Labor seemingly recognized that, and they issued a rule that seems to reflect that. So overall, I'm really excited about this rule. This is kind of the timeline on how things work. So in case you do want to submit comments or talk to us about the comments that you want to submit, if you have specific comments, you're like, oh, I wish that it would have done this, or it shouldn't do that because it hurts us in this way, just message them to us, because we will submit comments. The comments are due on January or December 1st. And yeah, I mean, the rule that was published on October 2nd, and it's effective from any job orders that were filed on or after October 2nd, 2025. I wanted to give you guys some live data to show y'all what the way that the wage rates looked, but because the government shut down, the actual flag system is down as well. So that makes sure we can't do that. I'm gonna have to do that on a separate later webinar. But I want to talk a little bit. I stopped sharing on purpose. I want to talk a little bit about some compliance related things, just because I want to make sure that people are understanding this. The wage rates, again, are broken out: skill level 1, skill level 2. Skill level 1 is referring to jobs that don't require any particular training, experience, and certifications, anything like that. We see this a lot with all sorts of jobs. We see it on agricultural construction jobs. We see it on regular farm labor jobs. We see it with all sorts of different things. And so it matters because it impacts the wages. So one thing that I want to make sure that people are doing right now is they're looking at their job order, they're looking at their previous experience requirements, and they're saying, do I actually need this? Do I need 3 months of experience, or do I need 6 months of experience with this particular job? And if the answer to that is no, then it's really in your interest to reduce that, not only to attract more U.S. workers, which is also good, but to make sure that it's reflective of the boots on the ground reality. But it also impacts your overall wages that you're paying people. And so that's how the skill level thing works. And the way that you'll know that is it's going to be based off of the Department of Labor's website. They're building out the job classifications more, where it has a whole bunch more duties and all sorts of stuff. But it's really interesting. And then skill level 2, there's still going to be plenty of jobs that are skill level 2 jobs. If you're going to require a CDL for truck driving, for example, it's still a skill level 2 job. If you're going to require 3 months of experience in some construction labor job, it's still a skill level 2 job. And your wage rates will probably be pretty close to the same. the material difference that'll happen for you is actually on the reduction of the wages due to the housing. And the rationale for that is if you were comparing an H-2A worker that, let's say that they're performing construction level activities, or they're a construction labor H-2A worker in Iowa, and you bring in an H-2A worker for that. And let's say that that person's paid $20 an hour. And then you get a U.S. corresponding worker that doesn't have to commute for the job. They live in the area and they're doing the same work as the H-2A worker, but you don't have to provide them housing. And so what the Department of Labor said in the final rule is, well, wait a second, that actually negatively impacts, it depresses the wages of the U.S. worker because the H-2A worker is getting a benefit that the U.S. worker is not. And so whenever you're thinking through that, the way that the Department of Labor is doing this is they're saying, okay, so let's say that it's that $20 an hour, and then we'll look at the average. They do this calculation for us, but let's say that it's a $2 an hour deduction per worker per hour. The H-2A wage rate would be $18 an hour. Any corresponding U.S. worker that doesn't have to stay in your housing because they live in the area, for example, they would still be paid the $20 an hour. So it's important that you know both of those. What I fear is that people are going to neglect that portion of the rule, and they're just going to pay their corresponding U.S. workers $18 an hour when they should be paying them $20 an hour. That's not how it is. It is two separate things, and you need to be conscientious of that, because the last thing that we want to do is negatively impact the U.S. workforce by using H-2A visas. And so it's important to know that, and I encourage you that whenever you have a U.S. worker, that you reach out to us and you say, hey, how do I need to handle the wage rates here? Just to make sure that you know and you're in compliance, because I do think that that's going to be something that trips people up a lot in the future. There is another hypothetical situation, is let's say that you have a corresponding U.S. worker that's willing to relocate for the job. Then they would be treated a lot more like the H-2A workers because you're providing housing. The other thing I want to make sure that people realize is that this is not a literal deduction. You aren't paying the H-2A worker $20 an hour and then deducting $2 an hour for housing. You are paying them $18 an hour. The calculation that went into it is how you got to the $18 an hour in that situation. So I just want to make sure those two things are very clear, because what I don't want to see in the future audit is a timesheet for an H-2A worker where the H-2A worker had their wages reduced because of housing. It's against the H-2A regulations to charge employees for housing. It is, but the Department of Labor is allowing us to reduce the actual wages paid for that purpose. So it's an interesting thing. There's definitely some caveats there, but I do want to make sure that everyone recognizes those distinctions. And I'm happy to take questions on those, because I know that that's kind of confusing. All right, I'm going to reshare this now that I got through that little spiel. Okay, so these are the things that I want you to do now. I want you to look at your job descriptions on your H-2A filings, and I want to make sure that the proper SOC code and skill levels that you need for your job are actually on your job order. One thing that this didn't do is, and I know this is going to be a question, is, well, what if it falls into multiple SOC codes? They're still going to apply the highest of the applicable SOC codes. And so you have to strategize your filings based on that. The Department of Labor, just like they did last time, is going to do the same thing whenever they are actually conducting audits and investigations is they're going to make sure that the proper SOC code was the one that was disclosed on the job order. And that's something that we don't know for you. We don't know the boots on the ground reality on what the workers are doing on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you tell us, then it does make it to where we can help you strategize your filings. And we can even do this by helping you forecast your labor budgets by saying, like, okay, I should have this many people in this SOC code, that many people in that SOC code, because it's the boots on the ground reality. And I am not therefore paying the people at the lower SOC codes the higher wage rate just because I want to get them all on one filing. I understand that there's more cost in that just from a filing perspective, but whenever you actually forecast your labor budgets, you might there is a break even point whenever it's worth it to you, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes the difference between one SOC code and the other SOC code is 15-20 cents an hour, and it's not that many people, and the actual cost of the filing exceed the value of separating the filings, and there's no need to do it, and so you just put it all on one filing. And that's totally fine too. But it is an important exercise to go through. So right now, this month, before you get into really the busy season, audit those job descriptions. Let's forecast some labor budgets for you. We want to monitor the release of wage rate data and DOL guidance. It is a new rule. Oftentimes with new rules like this, the Department of Labor will issue FAQs, and those are generally really helpful because they do give some insight into very specific scenarios. And I really wouldn't expect those until probably December or so. And I would they'll probably do that after the final rule, but it's something to definitely pay attention to. Submit comments, whether you want to do it yourself or you want us to help you with that. I'd be more than happy if you just submitted your comments to us and we can incorporate them into our comments, or if you want to submit them yourself, you can do that on the Department of Labor's website. And then, consult with us to review your compliance documentation. These kind of wage rate issues are very impactful because of how, for a lot of reasons. They're impactful because whenever the Department of Labor usually issues civil money penalties, for example, and it's a wage rate issue, they usually do it on a per worker basis, not a per violation basis. So if you have 10 workers, it's 10 times that same violation. And so it can become really expensive. But you need to be able to work with someone that can actually help you review that the compliance of your filing. So we'd be more than happy to help you with that. And of course we can help you with all sorts of compliance related issues, but I do think it's important, and I know that I'm kind of beating this to death, but I do think it's particularly important that employers really go through their job order now. I know that we're in it's a weird time because people are really busy with the actual work, but it's also well in advance of when you need to submit your new filings. That's the best time to do it. It's optimal because it allows you to start forecasting your labor costs. And I also know that particularly for our construction clients, they're starting the bidding process for next year. And now we actually have some clarity into how the wage rates are going to be ascertained. So I would talk to us about that. Talk to us about the compliance and how that correlates with your other types of visas that you might use. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the main thing. We want to make sure to protect your workforce, want to make sure to protect the integrity of the program, and want to make sure that you got plenty of time to have a strategy going forward that you can rely on and run your business off of. I'm going to stop sharing here. I'm going to go to the Q&A, and I'm happy to take questions. I know that that's a lot of information pretty quickly, but if you have questions, go to the Q&A and then just submit a question right there. And then Omar, I'm not sure if I can see him or not. I think I usually can, but
Yeah, for now, I don't see anything. We'll let you know once
yeah.
we have something.
Yeah. Okay. I want to run through a couple hypotheticals here because I think it's helpful to demonstrate it. So I know that one question that's going to come up, and I tried to address this earlier when I was talking about it, is what happens whenever we have multiple SOC codes. So let's say that you have workers that are performing some trucking and some farm labor. How is that determined? That it's just like it was determined before. You're going to have to pay the highest of the applicable SOC codes. Um, and it's the same thing with construction labor. Let's say that you've got people that are doing concrete work, framing work. You're going to need to look at both of those different SOC codes and see which one is applying because they're still going to apply the highest of the applicable SOC codes. I would imagine there's going to be plenty of fighting with the Department of Labor next year about what is the applicable SOC code. But again, this is where it's really important that you go through your job order, because if you go through your job order and we're fighting the Department of Labor on a particular SOC code assignment, it gives us a lot more latitude to do that, and it also protects you in the future. Because what you don't want to do is win a fight with the Department of Labor on what that proper SOC code was, and then they investigate the company later and then come to find out, oh, never mind, the Department of Labor was right to begin with. So it is important. Go through your job order, go through your job duties, be very comprehensive with them, and be very specific. And one other thing in particular for our agricultural construction clients is this might not always be the same from job to job, from labor certification to labor certification. And so, one thing that I think is good is for you to come up with templates based off of the type of building that you're actually doing. So, like maybe the work is different if you're doing construction on a dairy farm than if you're doing construction on a hog farm or on an egg farm. And I encourage people to submit their filings consistent with those realities, not just not just some template job description. I think that it's better for compliance, it's better for recruitment of U.S. workers, it's better for paying the proper wage rate, and it helps avoid issues in the future. I am very excited about the housing deduction, though. To me, that was always something that was so obvious that hurt U.S. workers, and it actually, from an H-2A employer perspective, your labor costs were a lot higher for H-2A workers than they were for corresponding U.S. workers because of the cost of housing. And then whenever they changed the wage rate methodology to be more similar to H-2B wage rates, but in H-2B you can actually deduct the cost of the housing, it just didn't make any logical sense. And so the thing that I really like about this rule is that they've made it make more logical sense. And I would love to run you guys through what that looks like on a specific case scenario so you can see what the wage rate database looks like, that sort of thing. But that's on the government's flag system. And right now the flag system is down because the government shut down. So if you go to their website, it basically just says that they've taken it down until funding resumes. So.
Hey, Kyle. Sorry for interrupt. Some of the attendees reported me that the Q&A feature isn't showing for them. So if anyone has a question, please raise your hand and we can open your mic.
Okay, so the Q&A feature is not working. Okay.
Okay, we have Anna. Okay, Anna, you should be able to speak.
Okay, so I guess Kyle, I'm not quite clear. I know you're talking about looking at our job descriptions and SOC codes But if our season starts in spring of 2026, can we start bidding jobs with the idea that that time frame this wage rate will be applicable?
Yes. Yeah. 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 And then just remember that just like last year, it will change in the middle of the year. And so I would be conscientious of that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm confident. I feel very confident that this is going to be the wage rate or the way that they're determining wage rates in the future.
Okay, and so do we find those new wage rates on Flag when it comes back up, or on the BLS OEWS wage
Yeah,
area? Where do we
it'll
find
be
these?
it'll be on Flag, and I want to use the OEWS wage rate data set because for skill level 1, they're using the 17th percentile wage rate, and then skill level 2, they're using the median one. And so I don't think that it says that on the OEWS wage rates. It'll say it on Flag, and we can also get that data over to you. So wait, as soon as it gets back up, we'll send it out.
Super, thank you.
Omar, can you let Warren talk, please?
Yeah, you should be ready, Warren.
What'd you say?
Oh, you should be able to use your microphone, Warren.
And I don't. Warren still shows he's muted. I don't know if that's on his side or ours.
Yes, he's muted. You just need to turn on. That's it.
Okay. Hey, Cal. Good morning. Good to see you again.
Morning. Good to see you too.
I am I'm approaching this question based on my previous experience, and you know that. So if I was doing an audit, I would probably ask some type of question as far as, because I know I mentioned something in the interim rule about experience and how that can possibly be a issue for employers as far as possibly causing a misclassification.
Yes. Yeah.
Just real reason why I say that is because if you, just from my experience or just my knowledge of how the recruiting process works, one question I would always ask the employer is, do you have the same workers you had last year, and how many new workers do you have? And that's basically going to kind of tell me that you have experienced workers on your contract, and let me see what kind of rates you have on your contract at that particular time. So I agree with you a lot as far as confirming and verifying their job description and the rate that they're probably going to use. I don't know if it's a safety net to have both rates on the contract just to make sure they're okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, the Department of Labor is going to require you to pay the higher of the two wage rates. And for those that don't know, Warren is a previous Department of Labor investigator. You were out of Georgia, weren't you, Warren? Oh,
Yes.
And and so the point that he's making is a really good one, which is being clear with the experience requirement is important, and remember that if you say on your job order that you don't require experience, you can't disqualify U.S. workers for not having experience. And so the thing that I always, if anything, lowering your experience bar is not necessarily bad, even though that it has a reduced impact on the wages. It's also good because it attracts more U.S. workers potentially, and it keeps you from the concern of disqualifying people, or saying that you require more experience than you do. Because I've also seen that, and Warren would know this because I'm sure he did plenty of these investigations where employers said, I require 3 months of experience in whatever the job is. And then Warren and his team would investigate the employer, and then the employer would require 3 months of U.S. workers, but then not require 3 months of experience of their H-2A workers. And that's a violation. So that's why I think that the experience requirement thing is super important, because it doesn't only materially impact the wages, but it also materially impacts your compliance. Omar, can you let Deborah talk? It doesn't let me do that. Oh, allow mic. Yes, it does. Never mind. There you go. Sorry. Deborah, I think that you're muted on your side.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you? Thank
I'm
you for
doing well.
doing this, by the way. This is great and
course.
very, very exciting. So is the thought that they are going to establish new AEWR rate for this year or for next year and then take the deductions, or are they going to take the current rates and take those deductions?
Oh, that's a great question. So the wage rates are going to be based off of are based off of the OEWS wage rate survey. So instead of the farm labor survey, all of the wages are going to be based off the OEWS wage rate survey. So it's going to be a different wage rate altogether. And then they're going to take that wage rate and they're going to reduce it by the cost of housing in your area. So what you'll see is in H-2A, or what's called a adjusted adverse effective wage rate and an unadjusted adverse effective wage rate. But it'll be a different wage rate than the farm labor survey you're used to seeing.
Okay. And then as you're talking about the SOC codes, so like we utilize primarily agriculture equipment operators. So those are going to be a skill 2, and especially because we have returning every year. Would that be accurate?
It might be. I need to reference back the job order. It's possible that it's skill level 1, which would be really nice. But I'll look at it. I think it probably is skill level 2. But it still would be more of it'll be an agricultural equipment and operator wage rate.
And to Warren's point, which I appreciated, is if you're having returning, and that's gonna then reflect as experienced.
The experience part is based off of your job order. So what experience level are you requiring of corresponding U.S. workers is what's important there.
Okay, so really go to that. And
yeah, even if your H-2A workers have more experience, that doesn't necessarily kick them up into a skill level 2 wage rate. It's what experience level would you require of a corresponding U.S. worker that you're recruiting to fill that role? That's what's important.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I think what Warren was saying, and Warren, you can correct me if I'm wrong on what you're saying because I don't want to misquote you here. But I think that what he was saying is during his investigations, he would ask those questions to find out what is the true level of experience being required by the employer. Nailed it. So I saw that thumbs up, Warren. All right. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I'm sure more questions will come up. Right now, the homework is look at your job duties, look at your experience, and then plan your filings accordingly for next year. And it'll be a lot easier for you to do that whenever the Department of Labor's website's back up. So whenever the government opens back up, that should happen. But I would just take a look at those. And then we'll probably do another webinar. I really wanted to walk y'all through some live examples on how this looks, because I think it's hard when we're talking about these things in the abstract, what it's going to look like. It's a lot easier whenever you actually see it. And so I would like to do that after their website's back up, or maybe I'll just record a video and send it out or something like that. I just want to make sure that people can actually see what it looks like. Yeah, go ahead, Warren. I think you're still able to talk.
Okay, just real quick, Cal. So it's October 2nd, applied or approved. is the new rule applying to?
Uh,
Effective for?
The rule is effective for any job order that's filed on or after January 2nd.
Okay, so the people who have filed September 30th, they're stuck with the old rule.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Wait, so
Yeah,
that means technically that if our 75-day filing start date is in December, we actually wouldn't qualify for these wages.
No, you
That-
would. You
Okay.
would. Yeah. Yeah. So Warren was saying if the job order was filed on September 30th of this year, and what I was saying is, yeah, that uses the old wage rate methodology. October 2nd of this year and onward would use this wage rate methodology.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm sure more questions will come up. Whenever y'all have questions, always feel free to reach out. More than happy to talk it through. I know that that's a lot of information, and it's hard to describe it because it's abstract right now. It hasn't really been applied very much, and so you'll, just like everything else, learn a lot more as time goes on. But obviously, really excited to have everyone here, and more than happy to talk to people whenever they have questions or concerns or are trying to figure out and plan for the business. Thanks, everyone.